We are recording, so we should be good, and I will just, yeah, we should be good. So here we go, and continue.
Well, I think Charles, you were just talking about um, your experience speaking with people who are experiencing homelessness in the city,
Right.
and thinking about I was thinking about Chekhov's The Man with the Little Hammer, knocking on the door, reminding everyone who's happy that their happiness is coming at a cost to this
Exactly.
this great suffering, usually invisible. Brett again has these nightmares that he's caused he's murdered someone, and he doesn't know who and when. That guilt, I'm wondering if that texture of the invisibility of the suffering comes at odds with the visibility of the increasing homeless population in the city. And one of the most haunting parts of the book in my mind is that moment when Alma is in the Skyway. She's shopping for a birthday gift for her husband, and she encounters a man who is suffering immensely and is like almost crawling at her. And she, despite her good intentions and her desire to be an activist again, and it's not too late for me to be an activist, I can be part of this. Despite all of her best intentions, she reacts with fear and a serious, uncontrollable kind of confrontation with the darker side of reality. And I'm just curious about the way that you are thinking about that problem in the book, the kind of tension between the invisibility and the increasing visibility of that suffering.
Yeah. Well, I think I would ask almost anybody who has tuned into this how they would have reacted if they had seen in the Minneapolis Skyway somebody down on all fours and crawling along in evident misery. I think some people would just walk by. I think the most blessed among us would stop and say, is there anything, what can I do for you? Is there anything I can help you with? But I think probably for many of us, the natural reaction would be shock and to think somebody has to take care of this, but it's not going to be me because I don't know how. I don't know where to start. What can I do? And I don't know whether it's worth mentioning, I guess it is, that guy down on all fours is somebody I saw in the Minneapolis Skyway. The particular part of it that goes from the city center over to the, not that it matters, the Lumber Exchange building, which is a kind of obscure part of the Skyway. And I don't know what you would do, Chris. I was so shocked that I didn't stop, and which I usually do with street people and homeless people. I say, what can I do for you? Is there something I can help you with? I didn't do it. I didn't do it. And that's my guilty conscience. And that's the part of my conscience that I used in the novel, that part of me, that part of anybody that says, I should have done something, but I don't know what.
Yeah. Well, the guilty conscience is a gigantic driving factor for a lot of these characters in this book, but so is loneliness. And I wanted to ask you about loneliness in the book. We're talking about some dark themes of the book. I want to remind our listeners that this book is tonally elastic. There is hilarious satire in this book, where to the point where I was laughing out loud, interrupting my reading, having to read out loud to my fiance, explain why I was laughing so much. And then there are deep, despairs in the book too. And so a great example of the funny side of it is Bredigan's, he's a retiree. He's joined this group of retirees, old friends, and they just walk around the mall as a way to exercise and as a way to connect, I think, too. But then there are darker impulses of joining groups in the book too. And so I wanted to just ask you if you don't mind reading a little bit from the book and then kind of extrapolating from the passage. Ludlow, in particular, a radical, has been living in basically squatting in vacationers' homes while they're away, and there's one moment that surprised me. And if you don't mind reading, it's on page 57.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. I have no idea, in fact, whether what Ludlow does is commonplace. I thought I had actually invented this. Anyway, this is Ludlow speaking. His soon-to-be girlfriend asks him where he lives, and he says, like, you could say I'm house sitting. She says, but you're really not? And he says, no. You really want to know? So, okay, I was staying with a friend, sleeping on his sofa, but he kicked me out for various reasons I won't go into now. So for the past few weeks, I've been breaking into houses whose owners are away on vacation or gone for the winter. You'd be surprised how many people in Minnesota leave their houses and go south once it gets cold. Snowbirds, they call them. Hundreds of them. Thousands. Houses without security systems are empty for weeks all over this city. Though you have to know where to look, which I do. The very rich, those 1%ers, they all have silent alarms. And the poor never go anywhere. It's the middle you have to scope out. Recent money, carelessness, middle classers. Where they live, the city is vacant. You want a free room? Easy peasy. No lights on at 8 o'clock, no lights on at bedtime. Besides, one job I had, I installed security systems, and I know what they look like. So in I go, and I house sit for them. They just don't know I'm doing it. I leave the house exactly the way I found it, except better. I take care of their valuables. I never steal because I don't want what they have. I polish the silver and clean up. If there are dirty dishes in the sink, I scrub them spotless and put them away. The owners usually turn the heat down when they leave, but the electricity stays on. And anyway, I don't need much of that. All I need is enough light to read by. I'm a temporary tenant on principle, mostly because I'm a temporary sort of guy, here today in Guatemala. If I get a hint that somebody's coming back, like the paper suddenly gets delivered on the front stoop one morning, I find another place to stay. Anyway, daytimes I'm out, I'm working. But what if, Christina asked, what? That's only happened once. This person came home, an old woman, kind of bent over and deaf, her gray hair in a ponytail, dropping her suitcases in the front hallway. The foyer, no, excuse me, the foyer. I'd seen her out from the, upstairs window as she was getting out of a yellow cab. When she came in, grandmother type, very lonely, and giving off those lonesome radio signals, she called out, hello? As if she guessed somebody was there upstairs, but no one was in her house but me. And I left through the back door. Before she knew, I'd been sleeping in her bed like the big bad wolf. Stealthy, Christina said. That's me, he said. I'm covert. But the thing is, I got the feeling that she really wanted somebody to be there in her house, to greet her, hand her a cup of hot tea, ask her how her flight had been, any unexpected turbulence, that sort of thing. And how was it down there in Tampa or wherever she'd been? Somebody, even a stranger, to greet her, to care about her a little. I would, well, care enough to ask her how she was and to wait for an answer. Not a big bad wolf, but, a messenger. So I almost did that. I almost stayed. I almost gave her a cup of hot tea, chamomile, which I had spotted in her pantry. You're a very strange person, Christina told him. And I could have done it, he said. I could have welcomed her back in her house and she wouldn't have screamed, because you can tell by looking at me that I'm a good person. I'm like the very best person you ever met. I'm a bright angel. I'm a messenger that's from that place just past heaven, and I make visitations.
It's tremendous, and just the sense of that fleeting woman. And there's other moments in the book too. A woman in a window, very ghostly figures whose loneliness and desperation to connect is so palpable, even in these very fine brushstrokes. And I'm thinking about some of the major characters. I was looking at page 79 as one of the most dryly terrifying moments of the book in thinking about Christina's impulse to let Ludlow into her life and to begin to trust this clearly untrustworthy figure and potentially dangerous figure. And it's this, if you don't mind reading just that one paragraph in addition to this.
Yeah. I mean, this is the sound of a woman who will take up with a man whom she knows she probably shouldn't get involved with. But her life had been so dull lately, so wispy and thin and uninspiring. She was tired of realism and its wanton monotony. And she wanted a life that was not as real as the one she currently had. Her dreams bored her. They looked like previews of coming attractions that never arrived. Her job was so tedious, it made her ache. All the random men in her life recently had been narcissistic, money-obsessed, poorly educated assholes. She had almost signed up for lessons in swing dancing so that she could be thrown around a little by an exuberant, strange man with a good sense of rhythm. She was that lonely. Given her chilly beauty, men hadn't come calling lately. Somehow, Ludlow's appearance in her life seemed propitious. She felt unmoored, but also slightly ironic about her life, as if she didn't care what happened to her as long as the outcome was interesting.
It's such an icy passage. I love that.
That's a woman headed toward a not very good outcome.
Yeah, and I don't know how you feel about this, Charles, about reading allegorically or reading metaphorically, but I kept thinking about how true that felt for a generation and for a larger culture than just Christina. And I'm wondering if that felt true to you as you were writing it, that you had larger targets in mind with that kind of boredom with reality.
Well, when you start writing a novel, you're never quite sure where it's going to take you. And I thought when I started this book that there was going to be at least a small community at the beginning, the marriage between Harry and his wife Alma, and Harry's little exercise group out at the mall. But the more I began writing and the more I thought about our current situation socially, politically, and otherwise, what I began to think was that the question of poverty and the question of loneliness are somehow attached to each other. That you can be reasonably well off. You can have a roof over your head and you can have enough to eat, but you can still be lonely so that your life seems poor, poverty stricken. And I also think that one of the side effects of poverty is that nobody wants to be your friend. A lot of people don't want to be your friend. So I thought of those two things as connected, and I thought that a neighborhood politically active group like the Sun Collective would be, in effect, a solution, not a complete solution, but a solution in part to those two issues.
It's fantastic. And you know, when we're talking about reality and what feels in this novel realistic, quote unquote realistic, and what doesn't, and everyone gets to define those terms for themselves. But one of the maybe qualities of reality that we're thinking about is the texture of time itself. And I know you mentioned very briefly in our conversation earlier about how this year for everyone has felt we've become detached from a recognizable sense of time passing, and it's true in this novel too. I think you've invented a drug called
I did.
Blue.
I did.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. You've invented a drug called Blue Telephone, which one of the side effects of the drug is that it has a kind of quantum effect of the taker feels as though they're in multiple times at once. And so, you know, I'm curious if obviously you wrote this book, you were writing this book before 2020. Is it the internet that has changed our relationship to time? Is it what has changed our relationship to time, do you think? And what were you conscious of as you were writing the book, and what were you learning about that relationship as you wrote the book?
What I was conscious of was the fact that so many of my students, young people in their 20s and 30s, felt that, in part because of my generation, I'm 73, but in part because of prior generations, our behavior had canceled out their future. That both because of the worries about the planet, because of the environment, because of because of automation, because of outsourcing of labor. It's as if something has happened to our sense of what the future is. And I think that is one of the causes for the great production of apocalyptic novels and post-apocalyptic novels. These are novels about the death of the future. And so it seemed to me that what I wanted to write was an anti-apocalyptic novel where someone, and it turns out to be Christina, through heroic action, really does her best to create a possible future for herself, for the people she cares about, for everybody, actually. I think the drug you mentioned, Blue Telephone, it gives her, it makes her feel as if she's in two places at once, which is very comforting to her. But what she really wants is some sort of viable future. And she may have that by the end of the novel, although at some great cost to herself.
Yes, and I'm wary of spoiling anything for readers, but I have I have a lot of questions about the role of family in that optimism, and the role of an almost conservative kind of nuclear family as a kind of route towards optimism, or which is really interesting and complicating in a novel about radicalism.
I almost surprised myself, because I found that one of the things that was happening when I wrote the book was that what we're witnessing in the course of the story is the fragmentation of a family, with the loss of a child who's gone to live on the streets, and in the second half of the book, a restoration of a family through, well, I won't say what, but the family is restored. And technically, structurally, given the ending of the book is kind of a comedy, because it ends, I hope I'm not spoiling things, it ends with the possibility of more life. It ends with the possibility of a marriage. Yeah.
Right. And structurally, we begin and end the novel in the same space, and so there's a kind of cyclical nature of the structure that I'm really interested in too. So this is going to be off camera. We'll talk about the spoilers together. But
okay.
Yeah, is this a good time to bring Annie back in and to start asking the viewers if there are questions from the audience?
Sure. All right. Well, that was great. Thank you, everyone who made their way over to this part 2 of the video. My apologies. According to tech support, it was just one of the 3 of us briefly lost connectivity, and it sent the whole thing on its way. So thank you very much for being here with us on this video. And if you have questions for Charles about the Sun Collective, or any of his other work, or questions for Chris, let us know. Just type them in the chat and we will answer them. But for now, I'll ask my standard bookseller virtual event question, which I feel like is even more fun since we don't often have that many events in December usually. So the virtual events actually kind of open up a new opportunity. We don't like to crowd the store too much in December's usually. It's a little chaotic there, but what have you both been reading lately? And if you have a particular favorite of the year, what would make it a good gift? I'll ask each of you.
Chris, do you want to start?
Sure. I've found myself, I'm not sure, Charles, if you've had this experience, and Annie too, if you've had this experience, I've been craving things that have lasted. So I don't know why that is, but this year has been a return to the classics for me. And so right now I'm 700, almost done with Middlemarch again. I'm wow. Right there towards the end. Yeah. And so that's been a real joy. I've been actually reading it chapter by chapter out loud to my fiance at night. So we've been doing this for a very long time, and it's been a real pleasure. So a very nerdy and potentially sentimental answer, but that's been my mindset this year. Yeah.
Plus, classics always make good gifts too, because there's so many different editions of them. Like, you can probably find something really cool looking and very pretty, great gift. What about you, Charles?
Well, I'll mention 2 or 3 books. One of the things that I've noticed about our experience of the pandemic is that all of those books that the long books that take a lot of time, that you put off reading, now's the time to read them. You're never going to have as much time probably as you do now. So let's see, 3 books. A plug for my former student Mike Alberti, whose book of stories, Some People Bring You Down, has just come out. It's a wonderful book of stories, beautifully put together, and if anybody buys it and doesn't like it, they can get in touch with me and I'll refund their money for them. The second book, which I don't know that I can show because my computer is resting on it, is this book, Time of the Magicians. And it's a nonfiction book about philosophers in Germany between World War I and World War II, and what they were doing and thinking in this period of cultural upheaval. I guess I've been thinking a lot about the 1918 flu epidemic. I've been thinking a lot about Weimar Germany and what the Germans went through and what came out of that. And I guess the other plug I would put in is for the novel that influenced me more than any other in the writing of the Sun Collective. And it's this novel, Mikhail Bulgakov's The Master and Margarita, which was written in the 1930s in the Soviet Union. It couldn't be published until long after Bulgakov's death, but it's a very moving political satire and wonderland. And the reason it matters so much to me is that I think that my book has one foot in realism and the other foot, this is a mixed metaphor, in a kind of wonderland fantasy world. Not everything that happens in my book is real world stuff. I have a talking dog and talking cat, which I thought, oh, I'll never get away with this. And then I thought, I'm 70, I'm in my 70s. If I can't do it now, when am I going to do it?
And I know, Charles, you're from previous interviews I've read with you, you're a huge fan of William Maxwell. So I'm not sure how much you were thinking about that during the choices with the very heartwarming and seriously moving conversations between the dog, cat, and Alma. But I was thinking about them. Yeah. In Maxwell's wonderful novel, So Long, See You Tomorrow, the point of view keeps shifting from one character to another, and at one stage in the novel, the point of view goes into the family dog, very believably, I think. You think, yeah, that's probably the way that dog would think and behave. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Great. Well, you're both officially deputized as booksellers because those were great recommendations and great reasons. So thank you. Mm-hmm. Actually, when we stop recording this video, I will put those titles in the comments under this in case people want to go back to them and check them out. Yeah, that's great. Yeah. Any other questions from the audience? We've got several of you watching, I can see. Thank you again for being here. We just have some comments. Middlemarch, yes. And Jessica says you're one of her favorite authors. So yay, Charles. Well, we'll see if we get any comments roll in the next few seconds. Chris, do you have any final thoughts for Charles about the book?
Well, I'm still thinking so much about it, and I know I'm going to probably send a really long email with a million more questions. But I do, and you don't have to answer that email, by the way. But I was thinking about writing Ludlow. Seemed both like just tremendous fun, but also like just like nitroglycerin, just very, very dangerous too. And writing about someone who is so essentialist and so, who categorizes people so clearly in his mind and believes so fervently in his vision of the world, when there's no room in the character for doubt or curiosity, yet the character is written through curiosity and doubt. This is almost a selfish question about the craft of writing a character like that, but can you just talk about where you find the energy to stick with a character who's so clearly driven to go in his own direction?
It's partly it's a wonderful question. It's partly a predatory instinct on the part of a writer to move toward or to gravitate toward characters who are willing to act on convictions, whether the convictions are good or not. I think as readers, we want to see our characters doing interesting things. And in my classes, I've talked about a figure I call Captain Happen. Captain Happen is the person in the story who makes things happen. He or she or they will say the things that nobody else will say, will do the things that nobody else will do. They push the story forward, and they push it through a one-way gate, which is to say that the Captain Happen character will very often act in such a way that you can't get back to where you were before the person did something. Now, Ludlow, like Christina, is very intelligent, and he's very well educated, and he's full of rage, which makes him a kind of spark plug character. He's going to do things. He's going to commit actions that nobody else will do. Alma may have a bad conscience, and Harry, her husband, may have a bad conscience, and Harry may think that he is capable of great harm or destruction. But Ludlow is actually the person who can do that. So it's as if the things that Harry only thinks about are the things that Ludlow will actually do. The trouble is that Christina doesn't know whether he's only contemplating doing them or is actually going to do them. And I felt that, well, I mean, this answer is getting too long. I felt that the novel was reflecting the fact that we are in a political period when people are acting on the basis of rumor, speculation, conspiracy, and gossip, rather than actual fact. And Ludlow is more than willing to take violent action on the basis of what is essentially a rumor.
Thank you. That was great. Yeah.
Thank you. So we do have a couple questions here. First from Jessica on Facebook. As a writer myself, I deal with rejection on a daily basis. It is still difficult to deal with. Do you have any advice for hanging in there?
I do. And the first thing to say is a note of, I know this is very little comfort, a note of solidarity. I don't know of any writer who hasn't gone through a period of rejection. I used to have a big cardboard box full of rejection slips. And I think the only solution to rejection is stubbornness, and a kind of positive. This is going to sound wrong, but I really mean it. A kind of self-love that's sufficient to keep you going when you're not getting very much encouragement from the outside world. It's very tiring to love yourself when nobody else will love you for what you want to do. But you have to do it to get you through the dark periods. And I guess that's my the primary advice.
Well, that's great. Chris, do you have anything to add also?
You know, the only thing I would add is, I love that, but you know, one thing I'm starting to learn, and when I tell my students this advice, I'm projecting a lot because I'm talking to myself. What I've learned is that the goalposts are always moving. And so when I was sending stories out for my first stories and getting a bunch of rejections, I just wanted to get a yes. And it was, if I could just get a publication, then I'll be happy. And then you get a publication, you celebrate for a day, and then you're like, oh, well, if I can just get a book deal, I'll be happy. And then you get a book deal, and then if I can just get good reviews, I'll be happy. You get good reviews. If I can just be a bestseller, you know, it's just never ending. And if you rely on the external validation, you're just never going to feel satisfied. So that's the only thing I would add is that I'm trying to practice that myself. Is only the internal stuff matters.
The ego expands and gets hungrier when the goalposts move, and you just want more and more, and you have to learn to try to shut the ego down.
Yep.
Yes. So one more question from Cordis. I just started reading Charles Baxter's Burning Down the House. I'd love to hear from him thoughts on the creative writer as critic.
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think I hope it won't sound too bizarre, but I think every creative writer has to be a critic, and particularly a critic of one's own work. So you try to get something done on paper, you go back to it or on your computer screen, you go back to it the next day, you look at it and you say, can I improve this? And if you say yes, I think I can revise it and make it better. What are the principles? What are the criteria you're using to improve your work? That's criticism. The revision process involves critical thinking. Writing involves critical thinking. I just don't think they're all that separate. When Chris is reading Middlemarch, or when I'm reading Bulgakov or anybody, I'm reading it. We're reading these books partly because we love them and because we love the experience they bring to us. But when I read, I'm also thinking, some part of my mind is thinking, how did this writer do this? Is there anything here that I might have used in my own work? And that's criticism too. So I would gently resist the notion that creative writing and criticism are absolutely separate, because I don't think they are.
Awesome. You hear that, everybody? They're the same. All right. Well, thank you both so much. We just have a final thought from Jessica that she says thank you for that answer, and also that Shadow Play is one of their very, very favorite books. So,
oh, well, thank you. Thank you.
Well, wonderful. Thank you both again. Thank you, everyone who's watching. Even more so than normal. My normal thank you for watching, because you had to work for this one. Thanks for being here. The video will remain available on our Facebook and YouTube page. And like I said, we will be putting the titles that both Charles and Chris recommended in the comments too, in case you want to go back and check those out. So have a wonderful